We are the tribe from the north, we're brave and we're bold. Defeating our rivals never gets old. Making our way to the Big Sky Conference. Watch out, 'cause here comes the silver and gold. Whoa, whoa. This is Tubbs at the club for the Vandals of Idaho.
Welcome back, Tribe from the North, brave and bold, to the official, unofficial podcast of your Idaho Vandals and your Vandal affiliate on the Big Sky Podcast Network. I'm here with my fellow college football Vandal nerds. I believe the correct term is pedantic nerd. Brian Marceau, how are you, Professor?
Doing great, man. Came back from media days yesterday. There's actually a ton going on in the conference we're going to talk about. But I got to tell you, I was pleasantly surprised about really how much news there is to talk about.
Yeah, it feels like we'll get into it, actually. Why ruin the show before the show has even started? And we haven't even introduced the man running this show. Well, today, up front and center, not quite from the shadows, Dallas Hammer. How are you today, Dallas?
I am doing quite well. I'm just trying to survive these kind of dog days of summer where all we've got is baseball and I guess MLS on occasion, but the Olympics are going, and it's just waiting for real team sports to start up again.
Right. So when you are a guest, we refer to you as Dallas. When you are a producer, we refer to you as Producer Dammer. Is that? I think that's what we'll roll with this year.
I think
today
that's
you're
how
Dallas.
it's going.
Yeah. Alex Boatman, the Boat, best of all time, will not be joining us today, probably because his boys lost to QPR. Oh, that one's got to hurt. For those of you that don't follow soccer, that is the equivalent of like if USC lost to maybe Idaho is a great example, like D2, like Central Washington. They're a whole tier below. And Man U being probably one of the top 5 biggest clubs in the country. Wild. And apparently he's still reeling from it, or he's moving to West Virginia, one of the two. Our guest today, ironically, is our co-host, Brian Marceau, because Dallas and I have a different perspective. We watched media days like the rest of you. Brian Marceau was there in person representing Tubbs at the Club and the Big Sky Podcast Network with a couple other Big Sky Podcast Network members. But before we get into, I guess we'll just get into Around the Bar. But first, we want to thank Montucky Cold Snacks. Ain't nothing like cracking a Montucky Cold Snack, an ultra refreshing light beer born in majestic Big Sky country. Best part is when you crack a snack, you are giving back. Montucky Cold Snacks donates 8% of profits back to local causes, even right here in Idaho. Supporting organizations like the CW Hogs and the Idaho Food Bank. Yeehaw! That's freaking awesome. Montucky Cold Snacks, a light American lager for pow rippers, gator wranglers, pony riders, and badass do-gooders. Visit MontuckyColdSnacks.com today. Find out how to get your ass some snacks. Around the Bar, brought to you by Hughes River Expedition. Media days. Brian, how do you want us to go with this as the guest? You want us just to throw you questions? You want to kind of talk about stuff and we elaborate? Or what are you kind of thinking here?
I think we should just start pulling some taps.
Yeah, I guess I could refer to this beautiful outline you prepared.
But actually, Chris, a great place to start, because this announcement came before media days. There's a little bit of talk on social media that we engaged in too, but it was further explained during media days. Is Big Sky Conference with Southern Utah leaving redid their schedules over the next 3 years, and there was a big change for Idaho. And for a lot of teams, but for Idaho, that's what we care about. Teams have new protected rivals. So if listeners don't know what that means, because the Big Sky Conference is huge, we can't play teams every team can't play every other team every single year. So we have what are called protected rivals. Those are 2 games that you're going to play every single year. The term rival is loose. We could probably call it protected game that should matter a little bit more. Because, of course, not all the rivalries are what we think of when we say the word rivalry. But for Idaho, we have had Eastern Washington and Montana as our recurring games. Frustration we talked about on this show is that we didn't get to play Idaho State every year. We traded. We still have Eastern Washington playing every year. We're no longer playing University of Montana year in and year out. We are going to be playing Idaho State instead. And that game for the next 3 years is going to be treated as it's like special rivalry game where it's the last game of the season, kind of like Cat Grizz is the last game of the season, kind of like the Causeway Classic between UC Davis and Sacramento State is the last game of the season. I'm pretty sure that, Chris, you're going to be like me where there isn't one answer to like how you feel about some of this change for Idaho. We can talk about the other teams too, because we need to go over what the worst new protected rivalry game is. It's not one of ours.
I actually love that idea.
Yeah, but Chris, what's your reaction to the change for us?
For Idaho, I'm a little bummed. I mean, I wrote an article about how I think that the Idaho State game should be something. I do like it being at the end of the year. It kind of sucks because we'll put it the most optimistically way possible. This is not going to be a huge game that will overtake Cat Grizz for at least 20 to 25 years, right? Like, this game is never going to be the marquee game that Root or ESPNU or whoever have on. So that kind of sucks. But for Idaho people, if you don't really care about Montana State is like the general state of Idaho does, then, this is great. Brian, as you talked on, our private stuff, which you can get into, there's a lot of sell from the state level. Like, the state is getting behind it, including the government, which is really cool to see them really embracing it. That being said, I love Eastern. I think Eastern is a fun game. I'm having a lot of fun back and forth with people like Kyler Neal, Nick Fell, Rod Nichols, Kelsey Hatch-Barrett. So there's a lot of people that it's fun to jab with. I just think long-term, I worry about that game where in the future, I think Idaho State and Montana would have been better protected rivals for us. Montana being historic, it's the second most played game in the Big Sky Conference. I think we're coming out on 86 or 87 this year. First time it kicked off was 1903 or something like that. So it's an old game. Both of them coming from the Pacific Coast Conference. I would have liked to seen that saved. Now, if we were going to lose that, 100%, I think losing it, like Montana choosing Eastern over us, who they have more history with, makes absolute sense. But instead, Montana is paired up with Bobby Hauck's biggest buddy, Bruce Barnum. As a Grizz fan, I guess that's fun because, Barnum's and Hauck are buddies, and it's kind of like, haha, but, Barnum's on the edge of being fired. I mean, maybe Bobby Hauck sticks around. I think he does. But, what if he doesn't? Then you've got, the next, Bob Stitt versus some BS Portland State coach, and people are going to be like, this game sucks. So I don't know. In my opinion, I would have liked to see a little bit of trying to keep Idaho, Montana back, or for the Big Sky as a whole. If it's not going to be Idaho, it should have been Eastern for Montana. Montana State versus Eastern, though, that's a cool switch because Eastern needed somebody better than Portland State to play every year.
So the highlight or the asterisk to throw in here before we get Dallas's take. The conference also changed up their formula for scheduling, which is why they released 3 years. So as a Vandal, I can tell you I was pissed when I saw Montana wasn't on our yearly schedule. But the new formula the conference came up with, which is easier with one fewer team. Side note, we all know, we just want a smaller conference in terms of number of teams. But the protected rivalries always take place, but now every 3 years, every team will play another team. So let's talk about Idaho and Montana for a second. Over the course of these 3 years, even though Idaho won't play Montana 1 year, it's just 1 year. And over the course of 3 years, we're going to play every team once at home and once on the road, which is better than, look, this is a thing that's happened with some schools. Idaho's had this experience where we've been the Big Sky for 3 seasons. We played Montana State once. There's other schools like that where the students are on the team for 4 years. We played Northern Colorado once. I guess they're in our conference, but I don't have any feelings for that. That change is positive, and it makes the loss of Montana's protected rival a little bit less of an issue. When I talked to Paul Petrino, and I talked to Terry Golick a little bit too, with Terry, it wasn't a formal interview, so I don't want to treat it like an interview. I'm just going to give you the basics of the talk because she wasn't prepped as though, hey, I'm going to relay this. According to both Paul and Terry, Brad Little, the governor of Idaho, is actually kind of getting behind the idea of, yes, Idaho State need to play. Yes, we need to treat these two teams at the same tier in the same state as important. Paul Petrino doesn't usually, go much into emotional stuff with football in terms of like his reaction, like I didn't like it or I did like it. He just kind of says, okay, well, whatever, it's what we're doing. That was more or less his reaction. He said like not playing Montana every year is like kind of disappointing, but it's once in the next 3 years. Bobby Hauck actually had the same reaction of like, hey, we just need a small conference. But look, we still care about this game. We just wish it was every year, but we're going to see him 2 years in the next 3. Not as big a deal.
Go ahead.
No, dude, you go.
I was just going to say, and the one thing to think about with the 2024 thing, it is one of those funky leap year deals. So we do get 12 games. Montana has to fill out their schedule, but Idaho does have an opening. We play Wyoming and Oregon that year, as well as I believe Drake or Dixie State. One of those two. We're playing NFCS lower tier opponent, lower tier as of now. Who knows in 2024? So Idaho has an open space. We also play week 0 against Oregon. So we kind of have like a 3-way flex there. We can play with 3 different weekends. So really Montana needs to decide if like playing Idaho and keeping some of this history and getting that rivalry back going, especially if in these next 3 years, 21, 22, 23, maybe we can get 1 or 2. I think that could be big. They basically have to sacrifice Morehead State, Missouri State, or it was another team that's decent, like Central Arkansas. It's not them, but like an okay team that kind of pushes from time to time to be good. So there's a chance this could end up on 2024. We brought this up when Idaho versus Eastern wasn't on the schedule in 2019, and those athletic departments were able to get stuff done to where Idaho and Eastern played each other out of conference in the Kibbe Dome. So there is still hope. That is 3-4 years down the line. So like I don't want to get too into it, but yeah, I agree. It was bummed as well. Sorry, Brian. Back to you were driving.
No, it's cool. I mean, the big thing is I had the initial reaction I had was being really pissed, wanting to do like an immediate reaction recording to it. It's one game that actually could be, like you said, there's a route for this to be scheduled. In my head, I kind of wish Idaho and Idaho State had that template of like, hey, we'll try to make the non-conference work when the conference doesn't. But Montana actually has money to make that happen. So in theory, this might actually be better. It's, again, I hate not having Montana every year. I absolutely care about rivalries like Little Brown Stein. That absolutely is part of what is going to keep, especially, older fans who this is part of what they grew up with. It does matter to have those things there, but it's not the change I initially thought. Dallas, we got to hear from the producer on this.
It's really disheartening to start. As somebody that was very openly pro Big Sky back when the WAC collapsed, this is the kind of thing I was expecting. Was they're going to play Montana every year, they're going to play Idaho State every year, they're going to play Eastern every year. We got 2 of the 3. And there's always a chance that, like you said, Montana's got some openings. We've got an opening. We can make this work. Eastern and Montana State, and now that they have this protected rivalry, they did that back in 2014. Scheduled, they were both, I think, in the top 10, maybe top 5. Scheduled out of conference and played right after Eastern played, I think, Washington that year. So it certainly can happen. It is very tough to realize, like, cool, back in the Big Sky, it's already hard to swallow that the team sucks. It's even more hard to swallow that like the big rivalry from the old days is gone. It's not gone, but it's not going to be played every year, which is it defeats the purpose of going back to the Big Sky. For me, it's very disheartening to see this.
Yeah, I agree. I was like you. I mean, we all obviously were in a chat pissed, like livid pissed. Like I literally said at one point, like I don't know how much more I can do this. Like, this is just between our record and everything. This just felt like another huge blow just to everything we've been doing. But really quick from you guys, I'm curious on my kind of take there. Would you guys, if you could pick our 2 annual rivals, do you pick it as Eastern and Idaho State? Brian? So if you're Terry Golick, you are athletic director Marceau, and the Big Sky is going, hey, athletic director Marceau, you get to pick 2 teams you want to play annually. Who and why?
Actually, that's a great way we should explain this process really quick because I can answer that question with process. The way this worked, and just in case fans are curious, this was institution driven. So each school submitted 4 preferred rivals. That was a job for the athletic director to delegate. That AD could do it themselves. They did give someone else, but per talking to Tom Wistrcill, that the selection of your 4 candidates for recurring games came from the institutions themselves. Then the conference did their best to match your top 4 with each other. Every team got at least one of their top 2. So to answer your question, my top 4, I would have had Montana, Eastern, Idaho State. And then 4th, probably Montana State. I would just not really be scared about us getting down to 4. So Idaho State would have been number 3 because I just don't have that historic. Idaho State and Idaho is not a historic rival to me, the way the Montana is, and the way Eastern, in my mind, actually is a little bit more than Idaho State recently.
Yeah, although we are 500 against Eastern, and we're only 1-2 against Idaho State. But producer Dammer, guest co-host Dallas. Did he freeze?
No. He may have frozen, so we'll vamp while he gets back in. Chris, while we're waiting for him, what would your top 2 have been?
I would have done Montana. I would have gone Montana 1, Idaho State 2, Eastern 3, and like you, probably Montana State or Weber 4.
Yeah.
So that's kind of mine.
And I got to stress, I'm not disappointed about Idaho State recurring. That is good. That's a step in the right direction. Something we had talked about on the show that Idaho State needs to happen. We just didn't talk about doing it in the context of getting rid of the Montana game for it. But and Dallas, are you able to answer that top 2 question right now?
Yes, as long as my internet doesn't go out again. For me, and this might draw some sort of heat somewhere in the state, but it's Montana and Eastern Washington. That's the top 2, not even question. Sorry, my internet just dropped again, waiting to make sure I come back. Okay, there we go. So it's Montana and Eastern Washington. This program needs to build some sort of base back. People have flocked away from the Kibbe Dome over the last really 10 years, but the time in FBS has seen this fan base kind of dwindle from what it used to be. I don't remember the last time I saw the Dome realistically even 3/4 of the way full. So the way to get at least butts back in the seats is playing the teams that are very close.
I was to say it was Montana in 2018.
Yeah, and even then it was empty at halftime, but you at least got butts in the seats for the first bit of the game. Idaho State, yes, the battle of the domes, or preferably King Spud. The in-state thing is important, but to me, the teams that are the 2 closest physically are the teams we should be playing every single year, just to get some sort of real, actual that are within a stone's throw.
Yeah.
We'll say Idaho State was pretty stoked about the change because for them, they traded Portland State for us, and that was a no-brainer. Like Fennessy and Vanderwall, they were both saying, "Yeah, dude, no-brainer. We want to play Idaho every year." I actually asked Fennessy. I said, "Hey, who are your top 4?" He said, "I don't care about top 4 were." I said, "Weber and Idaho State. That's all I cared about." Sorry, I said Weber and Idaho. I didn't care about anyone else, and I got Weber and Idaho.
Yeah, which is fitting for Weber or for Idaho State. It's like that is a win for them. That program, that's a win. One, it can help their program because that's something where the state of Idaho now is aware of it. And kids start to wake up to this game. And hopefully someday, I don't know if it's possible with a school like Boise State in our footprint or for us being 8 miles from Wazoo, can you build this into something that, like, if Boise State is playing somebody like UNLV, can more people in the state tune in to watch Idaho State versus Boise State versus nobody in the Mountain West or Big 12 or whatever the hell happens in the FBS level right now? Like, maybe. And like I said, it's 20 years probably before we get something really fiery and consistent, which is just a reminder to people that how big the Little Brown Stein loss was. The Little Brown Stein used to be played after Cat Grizz. It was the game in the Big Sky. Eventually we leave. Fast forward 15 years later, Montana State actually becoming good actually helps this a lot too. But Montana State seems like this untouchable rivalry. But people have to remember at one point, it was Idaho, Montana. And then it became Montana State. Not saying that rivalry didn't already exist, but it blew up after Idaho left, and those two and Montana State finally kind of became competitive. Maybe that's the case here. We've already lost to Idaho State twice. Maybe with Idaho State being competitive, Vandals do start to resent them more. Maybe it can bring some money into that program, and it will be more fun for Vandals to go there. Because right now, it's not a great place to watch a game. I'm not trying to be mean to Idaho State people. I think they are even aware of it. It's just not. I mean, hopefully that can get turned around, get some money in there. If the state's buying into it, maybe we can get some funding there. I don't know. But either way, I just hope this can blossom. And then someday we'll laugh and go like, remember when we were pissed that I don't think we'll ever laugh that we lost Montana. But I don't know. Glass half full approach over glass half empty.
Well, you got to remember, too, for Idaho State, 2 years ago or 3 years ago when they hosted Idaho in our first season back, that was their best attended game in God knows how long. They did have pretty good energy. So, I mean, there's reason to be hopeful for it, but I think we've put a button on this pretty well. Yep. It's not bad news to play Idaho State. It does kind of suck with Montana thing. Last asterisk, so the 2024 is the first year we don't have Montana on our schedule. In terms of realignment, there's a chance that might feel like 500 years from now, because
we could be redoing the schedule next year.
Yeah,
you could go to the WAC or the California schools like Weber. I know they're really pushing for Weber. Who knows? Like 2024. Remember, they used to have the schedule all the way through 2023, I believe, and they had to redo it because Southern Utah left. So here we are, only like 2 years into the schedules they made back in 2019 or whatever. Yeah. And, they're already changing. And that was without total craziness in conference realignment. We have just started crazy talk in conference realignment. But, Brian, maybe you could tell us a little bit about who might be televising these games.
Okay, we're going to hold the pick the worst protected rival game for the end. But so, that's other big news is the conference gave more details about the ESPN Plus deal. They also gave details about the Root Sports schedule and the ESPNU schedule. To run through real quick, the Root Sports deal is a 4-year deal. Tom Wistrcill said he thought ESPN Plus was the right place to go to. 2, because of the changing landscape of how people consume sports, he wanted a contract long enough for us to have some consistency, but he really didn't want to be locked in. Again, we talk about the changing landscape. 4 years from now, streaming, what platforms people want to use for streaming may be different.
Prime, yeah.
Exactly. He didn't want to be locked in too long. And I buy that rationale completely, as in why an intermediate deal was given. Of course, ESPN Plus wasn't there to explain their side. But he also gave us clarity on the money involved in the ESPN Plus deal, which the simple version of that is money isn't being evenly distributed to schools. Schools had to essentially submit an audit of the equipment they needed to improve their broadcast. And the conference is giving out that money based off of need, specifically for the purchase of the things the schools need. So just a quick example, Idaho State, their production is, of course, not as strong as, let's say, Montana, where Montana is carried by SWX all the time. Very likely, Idaho State can receive a bigger chunk of that money than Montana, because Montana doesn't need help improving their broadcast, but Idaho State sure as hell does. And last, real quick, the ESPNU games, these are nationally televised. October 2nd, Montana at Eastern Washington. That's Saturday. And Friday, October 15th, it was moved to Friday to be a night game with no other competition. Montana State at Weber State. Root Sports is only going to carry 4 games this year. For Vandal fans, there's only one game you got to figure out how to get Root on. Otherwise, Root games are Cal Poly at Montana State, October 9th. Seriously, there wasn't anything better. Idaho at Eastern Washington on October 16th. That's the one for us to care about. So if you can't watch it on Root, just get your ass to Cheney. October 30th, Southern Utah, Montana, and then November 20th, Cat Grizz in Missoula.
I'm also looking at that October 30th game. Like there was nothing better.
Yeah. Okay. I don't want to nitpick the schedule that part too much, because honestly, if you like watching the Big Sky games, the Root games are the hardest to get a hold of for most people. So it's not like, for me, I'm not going to be able to go to Pocatello. I'm kind of happy Idaho State's not on Root Sports the last week of the season, so that I have to figure out what the hell am I going to do to watch this. But I got to tell you, when Mr. Sill talked through some of this stuff, I like the direction. I like the ESPN Plus stuff. I mean, we already talked about that last episode, but when he gave more details about, the monies have already been dispersed to universities, so there's a chance we will see some broadcast improvements. Now, of course, Chris is right in his piece. This isn't going to turn Portland State into an ESPN college game day type of production or anything. But, I mean, the bureaucratic processes, if you've ever been involved in a government institution, man, those things can be goddamn slow. This was quick. So, yeah. I mean, really, my takeaway before we hear about you guys is listeners are going to hear us say this a ton of time. I really like our administration at the Big Sky.
Yeah. Oh, dude. I think we have the best leadership in at least the FCS level. If I was the Pac-12, I think they might have missed on swooping in and grabbing this whole staff early, but we'll see how their new leadership goes. But I think Dan and Tom have always been ahead of the ball in terms of thinking. I mean, we talked about in 2019 when we showed up to media days, they took time to sit down with us, the podcast people, because they realized that podcasting was this new form of content that most people were going to use to engage with the conference and their team. And we've all been, I mean, this is all behind the scenes. Most people don't see this. They're very communicative with us. We can literally ask them a question, Twitter, email, whatever, and they get back to us. And they do that with a lot of people. I know that too. So it's they're not afraid. They're not hiding behind a shield. They're very much approachable. And I think they do have ideas to get ahead of stuff, like the influencer thing, which I don't know if it's in here somewhere. But long story short, what they did was basically hired this company to help with NIL. Let these student athletes know how to prep themselves instead of hiding from it and trying to shun it away and be sure, this is here now, but don't do it. Day one, they hire a company to help their athletes do it. And that's the kind of stuff they do that I think is so much different than a lot of other conferences. I think I said this, it wasn't necessarily them either, but the Pluto TV idea originally, I like that they tried to think outside the box. They tried to go, how are people, they talk about with the ESPN Plus, how are people going to consume content? This is going to be one of those things where we're saying, they were a little bit ahead of their time. It's like the BMW i8. That thing did not sell. It was a fully electric sports car. People were how ridiculous is that? Now Tesla's, everybody's coming out with electronic stuff, but the i8 came out in 2008. It was just 10 years ahead of its time. And I think that's where the Big Sky is. Pluto TV was a great test. And I think that the conference was let's try something different. It's free. What do we have to lose? They tested it. It didn't work. They moved on. I can get behind that. Like I said, I'm not expecting Portland State versus Cal Poly to look like I'm tuning in to Virginia Tech versus Pitt. But we will see some upgrades. They took the steps to make sure this is still a step forward and not a lateral move, like my piece said. Still things I'm worried about, but it is becoming more and more clear as this moves on. I'm going to be less right than I am wrong. As in I'm going to miss more than I hit in that piece, which I'm happy about. Of course, I'd rather everything be more enjoyable. That's it. I am a Root Sports fan. I worry about the future of, it sounds like we're going to try to get out of that, or they're going to try to drop us. According to you, it sounds like I think they got the broadcasting rights for the Kraken. That might be why they only have 4 games this year, but I like it. It's a great production. Hopefully with all this production stuff, it doesn't matter and we get more stuff like that. But right now, hands down, every Root game we do is leaps and bounds better than anything SWX even does. It is the best broadcast. It's just hard to get unless you have DirecTV. And that, once again, people are moving away from that. People have cut the cords. So like me, they watch on YouTube TV or Sling. And this is not how it is. But all in all, I'm happy with it. I think the conference has done a good job explaining it. And talking about how it is going to be different. And though I'm not exactly stoked, just when we were looking for a screenshot on something, it was hard to even find the replay of our event from yesterday under the college football tab. Oh, well, because nobody was scrolling on Pluto to find college football on Pluto. So I have to adjust my mind thought a little bit that we're still going to be very back depth page of ESPN, watch ESPN and ESPN Plus, but at least we're there. And that ESPNU stuff is going to be huge. Because other than the HBCUs and really at this point only the SWAC, not even the MEAC, that doesn't happen. There's nobody else on ESPNU except maybe North Dakota State when they play some just huge school or college game day. Actually, I think the year they played South Dakota State, Game day was there, and yet the game still was on like ESPN Plus. It wasn't even moved to ESPNU or ESPN2, and game day was there. So the fact that North Dakota State and South Dakota State, possibly, I could be wrong here, I believe we're not even on ESPN, and we're going to get 2 games every year for the length of this contract. That's a win. And that's another example of like Tom and Dan are really good at what they do. And it goes beyond just them too. I know this was about our TV contract. Now we're just raving about the conference, but like Mary Louise Cook, she did a fantastic job. If you watched that, you wouldn't know that it was not somebody employed by the conference. You would think it was kind of a more neutral person. And then the fact that, like, as you have here, the FCS All In that was on Pluto is still going to go this year with Craig Haley and a little bit of Sam Herder, and the Big Sky, once again, is running this. This is for the entire FCS league, and yet the Big Sky is running this, and Mary Louise Cook is the host for it. And Dan and everybody are the ones putting this piece together to get the Missouri Valley, the Southland, the Wax Sun, and all these things together. Just great leadership. They're a step ahead at all times. And ESPN Plus, though it seems I thought was lateral, they've done enough of a little hop forward that I'm still behind it, because I think they're taking a hop forward before a huge leap here in 3, 4, 5 more years down the line.
And so a point you brought up before we get Dallas's take, we obviously need our fans to barrage FCS All In with requests to get Tubs of the Club on. Yeah. Because, look, I mean, it's cool that we're starting to get some organization about, look, the FCS, there are some active fan bases. And there are some fan bases that could become more active. We do just kind of need the product there. I will say one thing I talked to Tom about, which I just thought was funny. He told me, like he specified, now I need your listeners to know, please don't email me if your internet sucks. I actually get a ton of email. I got a ton of emails about Pluto, but the problem wasn't Pluto. It streams fine. It's your internet sucks. The ESPN Plus deal, it's not fixing your shitty internet. That's my words, not his. So, that is reality of streaming. We all know that, but anyway, that was kind of funny. Dallas, how'd you feel about ESPN Plus? Not in light of the new news.
Pro ESPN Plus thing for a very long time, because that's I've cut the cord. I cut the cord 5 or 6 years ago, which is very weird for a guy that used to work in broadcast television. But anyways, so I've been very hard against the Root deal because I hate Root. I have people that I work in television that work at Root, and I mean, more power to them, but I hate the fact that I cannot stream Root at home. The one caveat I had with this ESPN thing was, this is great, but I do not want to have our best games on Root where I still can't watch them. The Athletic reported in June, I think, that now that the Kraken are going to be on Root, the Trailblazers are going to be on Root, and in addition to already having the Mariners and the Timbers, Root is now actively working with at least Fubo TV, Hulu, and YouTube TV to offer some sort of streaming in the future. I don't know if it's going to happen in the fall. That was what they were shooting for, but there is going to be some sort of streaming option for Root. And if they can land that, and we're streaming everything on ESPN Plus, where we get a little bit of money to fix some of the broadcast problems with Idaho State, it's not going to fix that. This is terrible for me to say, but that awful broadcaster, that guy that needed to retire 10 years ago, talking about that incomplete pass and was 30 yards down the field caught, and they've moved on, and he's still rambling about how it's 4th down and they've got a punt while the next play is going. It's not going to fix those problems. We're still going to have to listen to people that their career spiked as being the guy for Idaho State, big effing whoop. But if we can now see these Root games, as well as getting a little bit better production on the things that are just going to show up everywhere else, which Pluto to ESPN Plus, this is fantastic. But again, for me, this hinges on this Root thing. If Root doesn't end up streaming, we're back in the same place that I've been of, how do I watch the best games, because I don't have Root at home, and I don't really want to go find a random bar in Spokane with the probably 2 other vandals that live here.
I think you're going to be all right missing Cal Poly, Montana State, though, right? I know you're really bummed about that one.
If Root does get a streaming deal, everything I said complaining about Root goes out the window, because their production is great. It's only an access issue at all. I've actually never heard anyone bitch about Root Productions. It's just the thing people talk about is, how the hell do I find it? Especially if you're on the East Coast. Grizz fans talk about that all the time.
I mean, we get a freaking in studio halftime show with Root Sports with Michael Bumpus and Angie Mentig, and then we get like guys like Taylor Barton who we've had on the show. Like, if Root could become available, 100% we need to keep the Root deal because it reminds me. I don't know about you guys of that old timey college football. Specifically, when I used to watch the Cougars a lot, where you had local broadcasters that understood what was happening with a good production. Because right now we have local broadcasters with a subpar production and radio guys. This is a full studio cast, and they know. It's like back in the day where like KTVB covered all of the Bronco games and KTIK or whatever, not KTIK, whoever Channel 2 was covered all the Vandal games. You had like a local channel that specialized in that university's game. So they knew the players, they knew the opponents. It wasn't like ESPN 3, which we were in the Sun Belt, where they didn't know anything. Root, best broadcast. If they can become readily available, absolutely. I mean, we should find a way to do that for sure.
The other part too that I just want to bring up for the Idaho State game, I do believe there's a chance that if Idaho State can become something where both those teams are like around 500-ish, or like that game, last game of the season starts to feel like it might determine making the playoffs or not for one of the teams, it would be great to get to a point that Idaho State is an ESPNU game. Like that's a kind of big jump because the fan base in Montana's are just bigger at this point, and we would need some momentum for that to happen. But like if you're a Vandal and you're thinking, okay, well, like what are some things that could happen with this deal to help the Idaho brand go elsewhere? Well, if we can start winning if we win some games, like we now have incentive that can get us off of just a Northwest broadcast into something that has, butts and seats across the entire nation. It's a big leap at this point. There's no way, like at this point next year, you'd look at the schedule and be like, well, ESPNU is going to throw Idaho State on. But, it's a thing you can at least feel like we could theoretically build toward. I'm not holding my breath, but I sure as hell want to happen.
Yeah, and thing to think of, University of Idaho has a larger enrollment than Montana, I believe. So, like, there are more Vandals out there in the world. It's just unlike Montana, there's no reason for them to be up, awake, and ready. So you're right. If we can start winning and get some of these people back, I mean, we have a deep fan base. It's just they've been shunned for so long. COVID. I heard that was a little hot topic with a very blunt no ifs, ands, buts about it, which, to be fair, is kind of like what the NFL and a lot of these leagues are doing. But, Brian, what did the commish have to say about COVID-19?
Yeah, we got mixed news on how teams are actually doing vaccination rates. And the commissioner talked about this. Now, he wasn't able to go specific team by team, but the Big Sky overall is doing a pretty shitty job of getting their teams vaccinated outside of the California schools. Like Sacramento State is saying, if you want to do any activity on our campus, you're vaccinated or you don't come. So Sac State's pretty high, but minus Sac State, the league average is about 40 to 50% vaccinated, with some schools as low as 25%. I talked to Terry, and again, I'm not quoting her. This is a paraphrase. She says she couldn't tell us like the actual number for Idaho. She's under the impression that Idaho is one of the schools that's doing better. Plus, you got to keep in mind we had COVID run through our program. So vaccinated plus recovered people means if Idaho is one of the better schools, we might be okay here. But Chris, the rules are simple on coronavirus. There will not be a single game made up this season due to coronavirus stuff. For example, Idaho, our conference bye week is first week of the season. We have no flex time. So if there's a COVID cancellation, it is a forfeit, meaning a loss for the team that inspired the COVID cancellation. So for the schools that don't have as many people vaccinated, there's also a higher protocols that unvaccinated players are going to have to go through. The conference purposely said, hey, we're not actually going to announce those till about a week before the season, just because like we've been through this, guys, for more than a year and a half, 2 years. Things change over the course of a month. So he said there absolutely are going to be protocols sent out about what exactly a cancellation would entail or why it would happen and what additional testing rules are going to be. But at this point, if you have a COVID cancellation, it's a loss. So like truly, if your team's not vaccinated, you could lose the playoffs because of that.
Yeah. Or, I I mean, I don't want to say there's a chance, but knowing what I know and thinking what I'm thinking, maybe Idaho wins a couple games they shouldn't this year due to some schools I think might have some COVID issues.
And
speaking of one we haven't beaten since 2000.
To be clear, I don't care about saying this. Portland State and Montana are the shittiest schools in the conference on this based off their leadership. So I actually hope Portland State and Montana lose games because of this. I like the Grizz. I've talked about this on the school. I've talked about my background with the school. I've talked about that on the show. But for people not taking this seriously, this is annoying as hell. The conference has put a ton of work. Our university administration put a ton of work. Paul's been open about, hey, like we just had to follow the directions that, the the head trainer here said, and it's annoying, but hey, we did it. We have people actually trying to make this work. I hope the schools that aren't trying, I hope they face plant.
If Paul Petrino literally says, yeah, it was a slight inconvenience, but I dealt with it. Come on. Come on. And I get you know what, you and your personal life, this is great. I was listening to it about DeAndre Hopkins. I think it was down here, his ball game in Prater. And they actually quoted the, best football coach of all time, Chris Peterson. But he made a point, and this isn't about COVID, but it applies to COVID. As far as everybody out there, listener, whatever. But when you are on a college football team, when you are a college athlete in a revenue-generating sport, you are put on a pedestal, which means you are held to a higher standard, and it is team before yourself. And he was talking about that when, talking about going out, drinking, driving, drugs, steroids, whatever it might have been when you were at – it's not fair. You are held to a higher standard. But with that, you get extra perks. You're known around campus. It's about your team, and you have to make some sacrifices for your teammate. Now, we're not going to go preachy on this. I'm just saying, as the college football team, is your goal – if your goal is to win a national title, shouldn't you be doing everything in your power to win that national title? I'll leave it at that.
I think it's just dumb that they have 4 years to play games and some people are unwilling to get a shot. It's too, we purposely have tried to not be coronavirus central for you guys, but this actually impacts games now. Schools like Sacramento State are not going to have to care for the most part. Schools like Idaho very likely aren't really going to have to care when you combine recovered plus vaccinated people. There's still going to be rules to follow, but refs, it's even easier for players than refs. Officials were told, if you aren't vaccinated, you don't get a ref in the Big Sky. So the Big Sky actually lost a couple of refs. Hopefully it's the guy who had that field goal call against Idaho and Montana.
That was because his eyes didn't work, though.
Well, yeah. Well, his eyes didn't work while he was dicking around.
Or his mask.
Yeah. Or maybe it's the guy from Montana State, Idaho a few years ago. Maybe we're lucky and both those guys are the ones who are gone. But
was that the same guy? Did we ever research that?
I don't know that much. I kind of hope it was, and I hope he's gone.
I know now. To be explained later.
Yeah. But the conference, they said, they're going to do what most institutions are doing, where they're saying, look, we're not going to make a requirement, as in that you can still play if you don't get vaccinated, but there will be protocols released later where your life would even just be easier. You will have a lower demand on testing if that were the case. I think they said athletes who are unvaccinated have to be tested at least every week. Unvaccinated are tested at the very least every week. Vaccinated people, it's every other week. But anyway, that if listeners were wondering, is there still going to be the specter of coronavirus in the season? Yes, there is. Now, it's likely not going to be in attendance at this point because every school has said, yeah, we're going to have things open. Obviously, that's subject to change. But as of today, I haven't seen a single school that has limitations on attendance. But that's kind of the button on the coronavirus thing. It's there's almost nothing to understand.
We're starting to run long, so real quick, get the last bit of politics out there. The Big Sky announced back March, whatever, that they had renewed the contract with the city of Boise to hold the Big Sky basketball tournament there for the next 5 years. However,
yeah. So the however Chris has is. We actually tried really hard to not talk about politics on the show, guys. But we're at the
give
point
it how it is and let people make
we can't do it on this issue because this is just where it is. Idaho's like the state of Montana. Well, actually, Idaho's more advanced state of Montana. We have a law that bans that relates to prohibiting transgendered individuals from participating in sports of their affirmed gender. We're not here to have the Joe Rogan talk about like body composition or stuff like that. If you want to, just Google it. But what matters for us is I asked Dan Satter, associate commissioner, and I asked Tom Wistrcill, the commissioner, because the Montana journalists wanted clarity and they got it. Montana might not be able to host playoff games if their transgender law goes through because of NCAA protocols relating to discriminatory laws. I asked him, okay, well, what about Idaho? Like, obviously the playoff thing would be on the table for us, but what about the Big Sky Conference tournament? They told me unequivocally, one, we don't have 100% answer. They both said that. But two, it is absolutely on the table that the Big Sky Conference basketball tournament could be removed from Boise if the law in Idaho survives through the court challenge. They both told me there's a little bit of an NCAA bureaucracy that go to like the Board of Governors for recommendation on that topic. But they both told me in separate conversations, if this becomes the practice law of the land in Idaho, we will have to decide, are we going to keep the championship in Boise? And actually, the decision might not even be made for them. It would be made by an NCAA entity that actually doesn't care about the state of Idaho in the way that like we do, or maybe even the commissioner of the conference.
Yep. So now you know, depending on what aisle you're on, just be aware of it. Research it. Do your own research because it might be something that comes on a ballot that you might need to be aware of. If you care about the Big Sky basketball game in Boise or the Vandals eventually making the playoffs or the Bengals, we have some Bengal listeners, just something you need to be aware of. So make your own conclusions. We're not here to tell you what to do, but just be aware of it. Tell us some of the like interviews. Like, what were some of the funny things that happened when you're talking to players and coaches?
So the first thing, I'm not even going to reference players for the most part because the conference had the players and coaches together, and this was kind of funny. No player, if the question went to the coach first, said a word that was different from what the coaches said. It's actually a point when I was talking with Dan Hawkins, he deferred to the athletes first because he obviously, I bet he was bored of hearing the athletes say the exact same damn thing he'd said. But nothing really big came out of the athletes. But as far as talking to individual coaches, I'm going to start at home in Idaho. I asked Paul point blank what Idaho's got to do to win some road games because we're not going to finish over 500 if we don't start winning a few road games. And his reaction, what he told me, and by the way, Paul was really relaxed yesterday, which I don't know if it's good news, bad news, whatever. It was just nice to have him look a little less on edge. He talked about the travel in the coronavirus season being uniquely hard for Idaho because Idaho traveled day of for all three of the games they traveled for. Didn't really even stay in hotels. So like for and when they closed season out in Flagstaff against NAU, they flew to Flagstaff, ate in the parking lot, changed, and then flew back after the game. He said that was uniquely hard for them. No other coach referenced travel. So Vandals, just FYI, that's what he said. I asked too about the quarterback situation because Paul last season declared Beaudry starter early. He said it's a competition. Again, asked him point blank, is Beaudry a starter or do we have competition? His answer was, we have a competition. Didn't go into who's the clubhouse leader, but that's the thing we've talked about on the shows like Hayes and CJ, Hayes and Mike. The answer is we don't know. Jermaine Jackson, wide receiver, who was supposed to stretch the field for us, who went out in week one. He's expected to be back for the second half of the season. And Zach Borish, the topic that we're not going to let that die either. Paul tried to be a little bit cagey, but he essentially boiled down to Borish. What we saw against NAU with Borish, where he essentially has a package where he comes in situationally, is probably what we're going to see going forward. He didn't describe Borish as a guy who they're certainly not transitioning to the option-based offense. He also, I tried to find out, like, hey, are we going to see him more like as a pass catcher, more traditional handoff? He said Borish, for the most part, he essentially said what we saw against NAU is most likely what it's going to look like.
So he's basically our Taysom Hill.
Yeah.
Not a bad spot to be in.
No, not really at all. Trey Walker and Logan Floyd were Logan Kendall. Why did I say Logan Floyd? Kendall.
That is an offensive lineman, so you weren't far off. Could have been there.
That's why I said that. Yeah, Logan Kendall. They were nice. They're pleasant Probably bored after a while too, but they didn't really add to what Paul said. A couple other like quick points from talking to other coaches. So Eastern Washington, Aaron Best said Ty Graham should be back this season. So good for Ty. Aaron Best also brought up that Idaho State's competitive against Eastern because Eastern needs to get better against physical teams. I bring that up because we've said that on the show. It's nice to have a coach say the exact same things we say once in a while. Brent Vegan from Montana State. I'm really curious how Montana State's going to handle Brent Vegan because, good God, he is not Choate. Choate was all ego, all charisma. Brent Vegan is pretty reserved, detail-oriented, and pretty relaxed. He definitely has no problem going over like specific scenarios with his team. He was not upset. He didn't seem to like take an antagonistic track with any sort of questions, which historically that's Choate's thing. It's like Choate, there's reports from like Colton Nuanez about like you say something nice to Choate and he acts like you just told him he's the worst coach in the league. Brent Vegan, pretty dang relaxed, really similar to Troy Taylor. So I enjoyed the interview. It's going to be different for Montana State, where Montana State has convinced themselves that like Choate's the best coach ever, and that every coach they had previously was awful, even though their previous two coaches to Choate each won a Big Sky Conference championship 3 times and Choate won 0. But that'll just be kind of a different thing to look at. And you know what? Those are really the highlights. Rob Fennessy was fun again. Bobby Hauck was actually pretty fun too, minus being dumb about coronavirus stuff. But Fennessy's pretty stoked about Idaho. He was, again, Fennessy is all in on King Spud. Paul looked at me like I was a little bit less dumb on King Spud this time. But actually both Fennessy and Petrino, when I asked him the King Spud question, because, hey, listeners, we know you're here, they both were like, hey, there's a trophy for that game too. I'm actually saying, yeah, of course I know there's a trophy, but we're talking about the one that matters. But, I mean, those are really my highlights. Montana State, that's culturally going to be different because that dude is just not Jeff Choate, and I think that's good.
Yeah. So big news here. Defensive Player of the Year goes to a Vandal, Trey Walker. We won't go into too much about what it all means. That will be for our Idaho preview. But it is the first time, I believe, since John Freeze, we've had a preseason MVP. So,
and Chris, didn't a couple people on this show vote for him?
I believe 2 of us did. I believe somebody else picked Jace Lewis. Who would that have been?
I was the idiot who voted for Jace Lewis. Trey's better.
To be fair,
yeah.
To Sam Herder's article from Hero Sports, he ranked the best returning linebackers in the entire FCS. Trey Walker won. According to Sam Herder, who does do his research, if you think he doesn't, you're dumb. That's just a fact. Put Trey Walker 1. He did put Jace Lewis like 3rd or 4th, though. So, I mean, you aren't totally off having Jace Lewis. I think him not playing kind of hurt Jace Lewis in terms of like, okay, well, we saw Trey, though, last year. Did we see Jace? Maybe some rust. I think he got the benefit of the doubt there. I think it would have been closer otherwise. I do think Trey Walker is the best linebacker in the league. So, happy to see him get it. And it's cool. Like I said, it's the first time a Vandals won this kind of award since, I think, like John Freeze. So, it was cool to see because not even Matt Linehan won that coming back after the Potato Bowl. So, like, any conference stuff, I don't think we've had anybody. So, really cool. A moment maybe just as a Vandal to maybe mark down maybe this was the turning point. Like, maybe, hopefully. We'll see. Yeah, fingers crossed, knock on wood, carry a rabbit's foot, all that jazz. Offensive Player of the Year, no surprise, Eric Berry. Like, I wish they actually, like, with the media poll and coaches poll, they posted – like the amount of votes they got because like who wouldn't have voted for Eric Berry? I mean, I guess that's what you guys think about these two. And then if you had to pick somebody else other than Berry, I mean, was there anybody like maybe Sammy Akem, I guess?
Let's throw to Dallas first. He's been sitting too long.
Oh, that's a very hard question, but I would personally say if you didn't vote for Eric Berry, you should have had your vote pulled away. There is zero argument I could make for anybody. Not Ulonzo Gilliam, who the entire UC Davis offense runs through.
He didn't even make all conference. That was wild too. We're so deep at running back.
There is no single player you could make an argument for as the MVP better than Eric Berry.
Barrier has this weird dynamic in the Big Sky because he's been here forever, especially because the extra season of eligibility, where him being better than everyone, I think it almost feels old. He also, when you make the championship in your first season, if you don't make it again, it feels like regression. He hasn't regressed. Eastern's still a very good team. He's still a record-setting quarterback. So yeah, no-brainer, Eric Barrier for our offensive MVP. If I wanted to throw away my vote, like Dallas said, or have my vote taken away, you might say, hey, what about Josh Davis? He's kind of a linchpin for the awful offense Jay Hill trots out at Weber State. But no, there's too many, and there's also too many new quarterbacks for, let's say the voters got bored and they're like, let's go with Montana starting quarterback. Well, he hasn't even started for a season, so like you're not going to get a reputational vote over him now. And defensively, I'm a moron. I should have voted for Trey.
Yeah, but I mean, Jace Lewis was a fair pick. And to be fair, Craig Haley, who is the other big national brain other than Sam Herder, literally also said the Big Sky's like all conference defense is one of the best that he's probably ever seen. Like this conference is stacked on defense, especially in the front four. And then Weber State has a lot of good DBs. I was actually surprised they didn't go 3 for 4. I think most of us, I don't know, Brian, you're more the Montana guy. I've never gotten the Robbie Hauck thing. I think that was I think that got stole from, what's his name? Is it Heckard? No, Heckard's the corner. There's 3 Weber dudes that were obvious, in my opinion. And then Anthony Adams was the guy. If Anthony Adams from Portland State didn't get it from the DB, speaking of he's the only guy getting NFL looks, like that would have been a whiff. Otherwise, there's nothing you can complain about. I mean, La'aka Kahono Ohano Davis, stud, right? Troy Anderson, stud. Connor Mortensen, great. Trey Walker, Jace Lewis, we just talked about, interchangeable there as defensive MVP. So all in all, I think they did a great job. Offense, I had more bones to pick with. I think Talalimo Jones dropped too many balls to be considered all conference. But that is very nitpicky, as we all didn't even agree on the third wide receiver. So I believe, Brian, you had him. So, or no, was it Dallas? Dallas had him. So
yeah.
we were on that train too. So
yeah, my bone to pick is the same there with you, Chris. I would have gone instead of Jones. Jones is really he's absolutely good, but he drops. I don't know how many times I have to have the conversation about like how the hell do Eastern Washington pass catchers drop this many balls, and he's one of them. I definitely would have given Hayden Hatton a look, but I went with Pierre Williams.
Williams from Sac State.
Yeah, Pierre Williams from Sacramento State is who made it to my ballot.
Yep. Real quick, Dallas, do you have anything, or we're running over and then we'll hit?
I just wanted to quickly
rankings.
say I'm looking at this ballot, and this is almost the exact ballot I put in. I only was wrong on like 4 positions, which is really weird. I don't know how to feel about that.
We have a thing on our Twitter. I will probably make an article comparing the all-conference team to our actual all-conference team. So we'll have that out soon. Probably a link in this description if you're not watching like the next day. Anyways, media poll. Do we have that? Or coaches and media poll, or either or? There we go. For those of you that are listening, thank you. 2021 Big Sky Media. Basically, the coaches and media voted exactly the same. Craig Haley made the joke. Who's going to tell the coaches that they're starting to think like the media? The only difference was 12 and 13 flop between Cal Poly and Northern Colorado. But otherwise, so basically, I'm going to read the coaches, not media poll because we're media. Weber State 1, Montana 2, Eastern 3, Montana State 4, Sacramento State 5, UC Davis 6, Northern Arizona 7, Idaho 8, Idaho State 9, Portland State 10, Southern Utah 11, Northern Colorado 12, Cal Poly 13. Any bones to pick here, or what were your kind of thoughts?
I've got a bone to pick, and I'm sorry, little baby. I do not understand how the coaches put Cal Poly over Northern Colorado. I understand that McCaffrey has almost zero coaching experience. He's inheriting what was a terrible team, but Cal Poly looked so bad last year. And I'm a Bo Baldwin guy, and I would cut off a leg if Bo Baldwin and Paul Petrino switched positions right now. I wouldn't even hesitate. Give me a rusty spoon. I will start sawing. But
yeah, and doesn't this feel like terrible? The coaches almost were spiting like Ed McCaffrey a little bit. Like Bo Baldwin's one of us, so we'll give him the nod over this outsider NFL guy. But, I mean, it's no secret. If you look at that roster right now, Cal Poly didn't have a quarterback last year. They had Jalen Hamler and Rodriguez, right? Or no,
Hunter
Riquet, and they both transferred out. Correct?
Yep.
So they have no quarterback now. Northern Colorado brought in a former 4-star quarterback that has seen time at Michigan. So, like, I don't know, man. Like, come on. What are we doing here? I was big on Southern Utah last year. I think I have Northern Colorado over Southern Utah. We don't get the Portland State love. I think it's obvious for those. Sean Rainey, who runs SWX Montana, has been spending too much time with Coulter Nuanez because he has them at like 4. Because Coulter thinks he's their top 5 or top 4 as well.
Yeah, so we don't want to step on Coulter too much because allegedly he's going to join us someday. But Coulter has said he thinks PSU is a top 4 or 5 team. I mean, he can tell us his actual ballot. There's no way. Yeah. I had Portland State. I don't off the top of my head and haven't memorized. They were down bottom 4. Yeah. I have no faith in Portland State.
And he is penciled in with really light graphite to be our guest in 2 weeks for our Big Sky preview. So maybe we'll ask him about that on there. Yeah. All in all, I mean, I think this was pretty spot on. I mean, Dallas and I had Weber State 1. Brian Marceau had Montana 1. So thinking those two at 1 and 2 makes sense. I don't think Dallas and I were 100% right. I don't think Brian was 100% right. So seeing 1 and 2 was pretty good. Although I believe Montana only had 4 first-place votes, which means there's only 3 people other than Brian Marceau in the media that picked them. I thought that was kind of interesting.
Yep, 4. Yeah, Montana had 4 first place, Eastern 3, Montana State 3.
Yep. Idaho, shocked to see us above Idaho State, I guess. But I guess once again, I think we went on to it last year. I do think we were a better team than Idaho State. I just think when we play battle on the road, and 2, I don't know what it was. I would have I did in my poll personally give Idaho State the nod over us because of that and the fact that we are going to Pocatello again. But I guess I can't argue with the media for putting Idaho State behind us. NAU, apparently the hot ending really benefited them, but I'm surprised to see UC Davis really being behind Montana State and Sac State personally. I had Sac State at 10. I don't believe in them. I think they were a flash in the pan. We'll see. I mean, I'm not going to argue that they played a hard schedule last year. I mean, they earned, or 2019, they earned everything they got. But, like, I just don't think it's going to be the same. I think UC Davis is actually a sustainable program with a guy like Dan Hawkins and organizational buy-in and not just being a state university. I think UC Davis has more of that recipe to be good. I think Sac State falls backwards a bit. And I don't believe in Portland State. Cal Poly, I do think could be better. For a little baby's question on YouTube.
Well, because Cal Poly could not possibly be worse than what we saw in this. They were so bad at they just gave up on the spring. I know they said it was injuries. We all know they wanted to not set the NCAA record for margin of loss, which they absolutely would have had a stranglehold on had they made it the rest of the way.
Coward Poly.
Forever and always. Cool.
Yeah,
go ahead.
We do have one last thing we have to get to. You're close. We'll do some production in front of everyone. You're about to close the bar, right?
Actually, I was going to say final thoughts on this before we get to our favorite, what you brought up.
Okay, perfect.
Best rivalry.
Yeah, last thought on this. We'll obviously, in our next episode for listeners, we're going to do our own draft where we go through the teams for a deeper look. I am with you guys on Northern Arizona. They're at number 7, and NAU was really unimpressive to me. Like, Idaho played terribly in that closing end of the season game against NAU, and we still, had we not had a blocked punt that gave them their touchdown, we would have been fine. NAU won a few close games in the spring, but I just have to tell you, I was much more impressed with Southern Utah overperforming, even though they lost to NAU. Keeping it overperforming relative to spring expectations. I was more impressed with Idaho State, minus their week 1 game against Weber, looking like they'd made some steps. Northern Arizona, to me, I have no problem saying I expect Northern Arizona to finish below both Southern Utah and Idaho State. Asterisk, we'll go over the schedules during next episode because that does matter.
Oh, yeah, Chris's super secret recipe of schedule strength began today. I've got it all worked out. I tweaked it a bit. So I'm ready for in 2 weeks going over schedule strength and who's going to end up where. Before we do that, God dang it, we got new annual games. Let's pick it. What is do we call it the best? And everyone can read my my sarcasm, or do we just straight up call it the worst? The worst rivalry game that will be played every year that nobody in their right mind will probably tune into. I'm going Montana, Portland State. I'll explain it, and then I'll let you guys rebut it, I guess, real quick. It's not a rivalry. It's just Bruce Barnum and Bobby Hauck, and they're not going to be there forever. I already kind of touched on it. That game sucks. Portland State's actually done all right against Montana, and since we've been back in the Big Sky, I think they've maybe gone 2 for 2 or something, just surprisingly shocking. But that's not going to keep up. Portland State is on the verge of being the next Eastern Washington, but actually folding, which hint, we might not have any of these schedules here in a year. But for me, that's not a rivalry game. That is a cakewalk. It's basically the equivalent of what used to be Montana State versus Northern Colorado. That is what shuffled in. Now it's Montana versus Portland State. That is the rivalry that's why, how, and how does a really good team in the conference get an easy annual cakewalk? It actually makes me mad that that's what happened. It should have been us or Eastern.
So Portland State was the worst. Montana picking up Portland State was the worst change in the protected rivalry games. The worst game, I'm still going to live in Portland, but I used to joke all the time about Southern Utah, Northern Colorado. Always have that game circled on my calendar. The new one, Portland State, Northern Colorado.
Damn it, Brian.
There's another Northern Colorado game for you to pick, Dallas, that actually could work here too. But that to me, we need a championship for the single game that even the hardcore Big Sky fans, you'll tune in 5 seconds. What the hell am I doing? What is in their Boise State game I could watch instead of this?
But at least it's going to be competitive. That's my pushback with it. That game could be competitive.
It could be competitive, but it's gonna be I used to call the Bob Curtis. You say Idaho had the Bob Curtis Bowl. That was back in the WAC days when we had Thanksgiving weekend game schedule. No one was there. We often played either Utah State or New Mexico State when they were not doing well. So it's truly the championship for second to last place. I've got Portland State and Northern Colorado. That's the new Bob Curtis Bowl. We needed someone else's name to not sully the great legendary announcer. Yeah. But that to me, no, you're right. Montana should be shit out of Portland State. But as far as I can't make myself care about it at all, and I care about the Big Sky, Portland State, North Colorado.
I think in 20 years, that could easily be 10-10.
Dallas, you're going to be the Supreme Court justice here, man.
So that was the one I was going to go for. Those teams have played, I think, 13 times since 1979. So it's not some sort of established rivalry. I think that dates back to when they were both Division II schools. They're both schools that none of us care about. If the Big Sky just randomly lost both of those teams, none of us would give a single shit about it. And most of the Big Sky wouldn't either. And that's where I would have picked that as worst rivalry game. If I had to pick a different game, yeah, I'd probably go UNC NAU because I feel the same way about NAU that I do with both of those schools.
Plus, they have the same colors. That would just be not enjoyable to watch. It looked like you were watching a spring game.
And Greeley doesn't even have the grass anymore.
It's just factual. Blue and yellow is a terrible color for a football team. Cue Dallas's hat.
I knew that was coming. I'm just going
to good. For listeners, he has a Rams hat on.
Yep. That hurt. But realistically, I think that we all hit it right on the head because I think if we cut out NAU, PSU, and UNC, there's a Big Sky I care about a little bit more. It makes the scheduling a whole lot easier.
Well, the games in Portland are fun, but I would say all in all, we hit 3 pretty bad ones. I know NAU and Northern Colorado, I think they're trying to make that a thing. They might even have a trophy. I don't know, but at least they're trying. Portland State, Montana, they're not even trying. And Portland State, UNC, are they the furthest 2 schools from each other now? Denver to Portland's not short.
No.
So
unless you'd say Sacramento is further. I don't know the geography well enough.
It's not exactly a like regional game. That's every single year you're hopping on a jet.
No, the best pickup I'd say is Montana State ditched UNC and picked up Eastern Washington. Yep. That's a fun game. And there are, like we talked about,
Idaho State for the conference.
Yeah,
that's probably good.
There were some good changes in the rivalry setup. Like the California schools are just themselves, which actually I love the idea that we're segregating the California schools because I would love them to build their own culture, and find their own conference. But I'm going to be devastated that I can't talk about the directional championship of Southern Utah, Northern Colorado. It's now the Northern Directional Championship of Northern Arizona, Northern Colorado. Yeah, no, dude, I just sold myself. That's our trophy game.
Battle for the North. True North. Anyways, closing the bar. Thank you guys for tuning in. We kind of hinted. That was Around the Bar brought to you by Hughes River Expeditions. If you're looking for a great all-inclusive week-long vacation, don't look past your backyard. Venture into the largest protected wilderness in the continental United States, located right here in the great state of Idaho. Join a multi-day trip down the Middle Fork of the Salmon, the main salmon river of no return, Salmon River Canyons, or the Selway. And you can even check out special trips like one to see the Perside meteor shower, camp on pristine beaches, run amazing whitewater, hike scenic trails, spot wildlife, soak in beautiful natural hot springs all around the river's edge. You also get to fish some of the most remote stretches of the river in the entire country. You bring your clothes and let HRE handle the rest. Hughes River Expeditions is Vandal owned and operated since 1976 and ready to take you on a vacation of a lifetime. What are you waiting for? Find out what it's like to grab a paddle, catch dinner, and ride the bull all throughout the Gem State. Call them now at 800-262-1882 or check them out at hughesriver.com. Once again, that's 800-262-1882. All right. Closing the bar. Next week, we will do our Big Sky preview. Hopefully, Coulter Nuanez. If not, we'll probably try to pick somebody else up. Brian hits on, I think it's our second year or third year annually doing like a draft of like where we would have all voted. So it's kind of fun because it doesn't always end up perfect. We'll also kind of break down strength of schedule and everything like that. So make sure you tune in next week live on YouTube on Tuesdays around 7 o'clock Pacific, 8 o'clock Mountain, or obviously it'll drop wherever you get your podcast feeds around 8 a.m. Mountain, 7 a.m. Pacific Thursdays. So we will see you guys bi-weekly for now. So we have 2 left bi-weekly. Big Sky preview, then the Idaho preview, and then we're previewing the hated maple syrup drinking Simon Fraser clan. Now it's time for the best band in all the land, Sign of Idaho, to play us out. Go Vandals.
Go Vandals.
Go Vandals.